Jeff speaking. Tonight, I sit in the studio with a heavy feeling in my heart. Before me is a thick envelope sent by a complete stranger. Inside are the sworn statements of a retired detective, Hobson Millgate, about a case he investigated for the past 20 years. Do you remember the disappearance of the Driscoll family? 6 people vanished in the night, without a trace. The newspapers were abuzz for a long time, and now, after 2 decades, the truth has finally been revealed. But I must warn you, what you are about to hear may keep you awake tonight. If you are alone, turn on more lights, and if you have a weak heart, perhaps you should turn off the radio. All right, I will read this letter. Word for word, exactly as Detective Millgate wrote it. Is my face this pale? Goodness, I must look like a ghost. It feels like I've lost 2 gallons of blood. What? No injuries, not a scratch. Sorry for rambling, I'm just, how do I describe it? Detached? Yes, detached from reality. It's a strange feeling. Doing this job for so many years, I've seen countless people fall into this state. I always thought if it happened to me, it would have been long ago. But it's terrifying when it does. I feel like I'm floating outside my own body. Just cut the invisible thread and I'll fly away. Have you seen the crime scene yet? Don't look at the pictures, don't touch the files. Trust me, you'll thank me. My knees wouldn't stop shaking. Is that why you're clinging to your coffee cup so tightly? Am I shaking the table? Hold on, let me pull my chair back a bit, this is better. We have to start officially now. Hop, can you confirm you're waiving your right to an attorney? No, I still don't need a lawyer. I mean, yes, I waive that right, sorry. And I'm still lucid as I can be. Are you sure? Recorded, retired Detective Hobson Millgate waives his right to an attorney. I won't need a lawyer after the DA sees that and vomits their guts out and then considers whether to release it. They won't show that to a jury. Are you ready to begin? No, but I'll talk anyway. What led you to the scene on the night of the incident? Would you believe it? I was originally planning to go fishing before all this happened. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Hold on, let me think. It's hard to arrange my thoughts. Never sat on this side of the interrogation table before. I guess I have to start with the reporter, Corinne Bammer. She contacted me a week ago via email, saying she had new information about the Driscoll family massacre. I was the lead investigator. The case had been unsolved for 20 years, cold as ice. Honestly, at first, I thought it was all nonsense. You know how it is, most of the time people don't even mean to. Everyone thinks they know something that could break the case. It's easy to make assumptions when you don't have to cross-reference them with evidence. The Driscoll case was a huge story around here. A lot of interest, a lot of press. Over the years, I must have received a few hundred ridiculous theories. When I retired, I handed the investigation over to Detective Carroll. I didn't want to bother him. I knew he was busy with recent gang activity. I thought I'd check it out as a courtesy, not expecting anything. I met her for lunch at the Pier Cafe. Pretty blonde girl, professional, not like the typical scammers or conspiracy theorists. Although I don't fully trust categorizing people, she could also be one of those eccentric girls interested in death. God knows I've met enough of them. I still thought she was trying to scam me, or maybe she was being scammed herself. But she had a folder of files that looked legitimate. Inside was what appeared to be the confession of the person involved in the Driscoll case. Ah, he wasn't the killer, was he? I really wish he was the killer. It would be much better for everyone. Can you give us the relevant details of the Driscoll case? Let's see, it's been 20 years, hasn't it? To think about all those years, 20 damn years. A long time, too. Take your time, Hop. Thanks. The Driscoll family was a family of 6 in a well-off, middle-class suburb. The father was a lawyer, the mother ran a home pottery business. All 4 children were high school age or younger. Good kids, excellent students, no criminal records. The eldest son was caught smoking marijuana at school once, but otherwise nothing, just the usual things when you thoroughly investigate someone. They disappeared on October 13, 1994, with no trace of their bodies found. This mystery, combined with it happening around Halloween, is probably why the press went so wild. It still occasionally appears on shows about unsolved mysteries. An entire family vanished, and no one saw anything, no one knew where they went. A neighbor complained about noise, that's how we got involved. There was an alarm going off, and they thought it might be a break-in. We dispatched a patrol car. When no one answered the door, the officer went in to investigate. There were clear signs of a struggle in the youngest daughter's bedroom. The bed was overturned, and the sheets were torn. The alarm was a carbon monoxide detector. We found high levels of carbon monoxide in the fabric of all the bedsheets, except for the youngest daughter's. We wouldn't have known to look if it weren't for the alarm. The neighbor said the alarm had been going off for over a day, and he couldn't get anyone to answer the door. During that time, we also found a few aluminum cylinders and some tubing in a dumpster a few blocks away. At the time, we assumed the Driscolls had been gassed and then hidden elsewhere. Except, of course, the daughter woke up last and resisted. The investigation yielded no clues. Of course, the first person we thought of was the father. We investigated, but he had no motive, no leads to follow. The mother was the same. There was nothing suspicious about the surviving family. The father had a few clients who might have a motive, but no means. He was a divorce lawyer, but not for anyone who would kill an entire family without leaving evidence. There was a chemistry teacher living 3 blocks away, and we investigated him for a while because of the aluminum cylinders, but he had an alibi. Same with a dentist who lived nearby. The wife was flirting online with a boy in England, but nothing beyond that, and he wasn't even in the country when the crime happened. We reluctantly accepted that this was a random murder, the hardest kind to catch when there's no pattern. We must have spent tens of thousands of hours on this case, chasing leads, nothing. We traced the origin of the aluminum cylinders. They were stolen from a lab 10 miles away, no security cameras. We couldn't find any leads on the thief. After 6 months with no repeated attacks, the investigation slowly went cold. The Driscoll family was drugged and abducted. As I said, no bodies were found. Who knows if they simply ran away? Until, well, I only want to talk about that once. Can you tell us how the confession reached Corinne Bammer? She had been following the case for years, both personally and as a reporter. As I said, this case captured the imagination of many people. Even ordinary people thought it might be aliens or demons. Bammer had published a retrospective on the case for its 20th anniversary. It caused a wave of renewed interest, as usual. As always, I refused to comment, citing a lack of new evidence. I remember her asking for my comments. That's why I agreed to the lunch meeting. After the article was published, Ms. Bammer said she had received a folder of files. She wanted me to authenticate them. The most important part of the file was a confession. I assured Ms. Bammer that such fake documents were not uncommon, especially with old cases like this. And I personally had heard 24 confessions regarding the Driscoll massacre. She still insisted. When I felt she wasn't trying to scam me or had a morbid interest in the case, I agreed to meet. She said the confession was sent by mail in the same envelope she gave me when we met for lunch. Can you describe the contents? Old newspaper clippings about my investigation's progress. They seem to have yellowed properly, so I guess they were from the perpetrator's scrapbook. There were also 6 photographs, supposedly of each Driscoll family member, along with some other photos of the facility where they were held. Look, my hands won't stop shaking, see? I'm trying my best, but I can't stop. I'll have to ask the medic for a sedative when this is over. I don't think I'll be able to sleep without it. No, I'm fine now. I don't want anything to affect my memory for your recording, carrying it in my head like this. Sorry, I'll focus. The photos were of the Driscoll family. Of course, at the time, I didn't know the photos were heavily color-faded and could have been of anyone. It was very difficult to distinguish features. However, given the complex nature of the file, I thought it was worth further examination. As for the confession letter, it was very brief. It gave an address. That was the first thing I noticed. I couldn't find the address online, which meant it had to be very old. The confession letter read, "Don't listen to the lies anymore. I never killed anyone, just took a while to prepare them for breakfast." There was no signature. I just remembered something, damn it. We received a breakfast menu a month after the disappearance. Someone had circled the pancake image in red. The letter read, "They're not dead, they're being prepared for breakfast." We filed it as a junk lead. Oh God, Detective Milgate, do you need a break? Oh God, how could I have known? We tried to trace that menu, never found where it came from, not anywhere local. The identifying information had been cut off. I don't know what else we could have done. God. Why did you decide to investigate the location mentioned in the letter yourself? Sorry, I wanted to make sure it wasn't a hoax. I still didn't believe it. I'd had 20 years of people sending me fake evidence. I guess this case also captured my imagination. I always thought one day I'd figure out something I'd missed and solve the case. It was hard to believe someone was just dropping the answer into my lap. I needed to see it with my own eyes. Corinne Bammer had located it through city records, but neither of us was sure it still existed. It was a derelict industrial building. The last time it had a valid address was 50 years ago. It could have collapsed. I think I also wanted to be the one to break the case, whether it was handed to me or not. That case had haunted me for 20 years. Ms. Bammer and I agreed to meet there the next morning. Can you describe the crime scene? Yes, it was an industrial building, as I said, about 120 feet long and perhaps 45 feet wide. A wooden structure, and its initial condition seemed similar to neighboring buildings. However, I noticed the facade had been recently patched in a few places. Further investigation also showed the entrance was chained and locked. As I understand it, it used to be a sheet metal workshop at least. Sorry, is there a trash can? I might vomit, thank you. Sorry, I thought it was all over. No, I want to get this done. I will need a sedative. I could smell something from inside the building. Very faint. I think that would count as probable cause. Not that I needed it as a civilian, but people never forget the smell of dead bodies. It's so bad they all have that same smell. I hadn't forgotten how to pick a lock, so I let myself in. You know what? I really wish they were dead bodies. I really wish he was a serial killer. Truly. Please tell me you believe me. I believe you. Can you describe the inside of the building? I'm trying to focus. Truly. Sorry, I just want to get a long sleep after this. Is the medic here? Are the sedatives ready? Good, the warehouse wasn't as abandoned as we thought. Inside was a hallway with 6 rooms. Old construction, but clearly newer than the rest of the building. The walls between the rooms were soundproofed, no windows to the outside or connecting doors between rooms. The only access was through the hallway. At that point, I tried to convince Ms. Bammer to leave. You understand. The smell was stronger inside. You could feel it like fine sand clinging to your nose, like grains of sand all over your skin. The rooms contained presses, hydraulic presses, custom 4-foot by 8-foot presses. At first, I didn't understand what they were because they were suspended over what looked like hospital beds, with IV bags in each room along with other medical equipment. That's how he kept them alive for so long. Of course, I thought I was seeing black spots before my eyes. Do you need a break? The thought of having to start over is worse than just finishing it. Then describe your next actions. The building was clearly an active crime scene. I had no doubt at this point. I was in the lair of what I believed to be a serial killer. I tried to tell Ms. Bammer to leave multiple times. She refused, saying I shouldn't be left alone. There wasn't much time to argue. My impression of her was a bit curious but fundamentally good, and I didn't think she would be a burden if she stayed out of the way. I had to make a decision: continue alone in case the family unbelievably was still alive and possibly in danger, or leave and call for backup. I had told my wife where I was going beforehand, so I knew my absence would be reported if the worst happened. We both had no phone signal. Sorry, I'm rambling again. At that point I heard. It wasn't even a gasp. It was like a gasp, but not quite. I don't want to describe it further. There was a sound. It drew my attention further down. I had to act, that's all that mattered. There were some steps at the end of the warehouse leading down to a basement. I told Ms. Bammer to stay put and drew my gun. I had a flashlight and turned it on as I descended into the basement. The basement was dug by hand, perhaps over the 20 years of their disappearance. I don't know. The floor was dirt, and there was a tunnel receding so far back that it had to be supported by regular posts. As my flashlight beam hit the pile, I wished they were dead. I wished he was a serial killer. Please take a break. After I recovered, my first thought was, thank God, they were all dead. I'm 64 years old, for God's sake, I'm not young enough to forget things anymore. When you're young, you feel invincible and that you'll never die. I don't have that to protect me anymore. Look at me whining while they had to endure that. It's my fault. I should have found them, saved them somehow. I'm sorry, Hop, I have to ask. Can you describe the scene? Yes, I can. At first, I didn't know what I was looking at. Damn it. Even now, I still don't know. It was a pile, perhaps 2 feet thick from the stench and color. Clearly, it was made of flesh. I thought perhaps he had butchered them and stacked them in pieces. That was bad enough. The first thing that made me realize the truth was the eye on top of the pile, perfectly round eye in the center of a deformed socket the size of a dinner plate. That's when I realized what I was looking at. 20 damn years of torture. He had basically put the entire Driscoll family between those presses for 20 years, keeping them alive with IVs, increasing the pressure on them so slowly that their bodies had time to adapt, until they were pressed flat like pancakes. He pressed them about a quarter inch each year for 20 years. Then he pulled them out when they were too damaged and weak to move, with no chance of recovery, and stacked them on top of each other. I don't know why. I don't want to know, and I still thought, thank God. They were all dead when the one on top started gasping again. What did they say? Nothing at first. It couldn't speak without help. I thought it must be Avery Driscoll. Not that I could distinguish gender or age, but the blonde hair in the places where hair remained was a matted mess. I think the bastard who did this must have removed parts of their skulls. I don't know how he made their heads so flat. Not as flat as the rest of their bodies, but still flat. Who knows how their brains processed that? Their lips were pierced by teeth everywhere after the press had flattened their noses. I guess Avery was 14 when he disappeared. I had stopped shaking. It's strange, isn't it, how our bodies work? What else? There was a machine, some kind of pump. I followed the tubes with my flashlight and realized everyone in the pile was connected to the pump. I don't think they could breathe on their own. Not after a while, there simply wasn't enough volume for their lungs to inflate. There was an opening cut right into each person's chest. There was a switch on the pump. I don't know why I pressed it. I was panicking. I wanted to do something. Maybe some foolish part of me thought that if I turned it on, they would inflate and be okay. I flipped the switch. It increased the amount of air into the top tube. I could hear the pump working harder. That's when Avery Driscoll started screaming. He begged me to kill him. He said other things that didn't make much sense. Just screaming about the calamity of mistakes, going on and on about the family. Incomprehensible. He was in pain, and I hoped he had gone insane years ago. Oh my God, that's exactly what I was thinking. I didn't know what to do. He wouldn't stop screaming. I believe he thought I was his torturer. A closer look at his eye showed it was mostly a mass of white scar tissue. He was blind as a bat. You know what? I've talked to some burn victims. They told me they found meaning and purpose again after some time. I don't know how anyone in the Driscoll family could do that. I said my name. I said I was a detective. I said I was here to help. I repeated it, knowing, of course, that nothing. No one anywhere could help. Ms. Bammer came, drawn by the sound. Before she saw the pile, she told me I had screamed and she came to help, but I don't remember doing that. Nevertheless, she was there. She saw the pile and screamed, but I was focused on Avery Driscoll. He could hear. He was lucid for a few seconds. It was hard to understand what he said, but I will never be able to forget it. Please kill me. It hurts so much. I don't want to be a monster. Please kill me and tell my family I died long ago. I don't know if they're still looking for me. Don't let them know what happened to me. Please kill me. He could still cry, and he did, even though his tear ducts were too deformed to notice. I should have forced her to leave. That is the only action in this matter I regret more than not solving the case 20 years ago, not just for her own sake, but for what she did next. I don't think she could have hurt them more deeply if she tried. She took away the last comfort any of them in that pile had. You see, they hadn't been able to talk to each other for 20 years. She said, "Is that all of them? That's the whole Driscoll family. They're all still alive in there, the whole family." For 20 years, each member of the Driscoll family hadn't known their fellow prisoners were other family members. They all hoped their family was okay. They all dreamed that someone out there loved them and was free from suffering. Do you know what the screams of 6 people tortured for over 2 decades, pressed down to 4 inches in width, sounded like when they were all stacked on top of each other? It sounded like the gates of hell opening wide. I think that's enough, Detective Milgate. Not yet, it's my fault. I should have tried harder to track that lead. Maybe that's what they wanted to say, screaming like that. It's my fault, so it's my responsibility. I shot them. Mercy is difficult, but I owed it to them. I was the one who couldn't save them. It only took 1 bullet to go through all of them, but I emptied the clip to make sure they didn't linger, to give them that final piece. That was the only kindness I could give them. We left and called for backup afterward. Neither Ms. Bammer nor I wanted to stay with the bodies. I chose not to follow the crime scene investigators back down to the basement. I asked if I could give my statement and leave. And after one of them saw what I had seen, they agreed. Can I have that sedative now? Yes, of course. Thank you. Please send the medic in. I'll roll up my sleeve. My wife has diabetes, so I'm used to the procedure. Oh, and please make sure Ms. Bammer gets some too. She seemed worse off than me afterward. Poor girl couldn't vomit or cry. Of course. Do you know where she is now? She told the scene supervisor she was going home, but we haven't been able to contact her. Have you tried the newspaper? Which newspaper? The Daily World. Are you sure? No one named Bammer works at the Daily World. And that's it. The letter ends there. I don't know what to say. 20 years. 20 years being pressed under those machines, little by little. And the one who did it, the one who called himself BER, is still out there somewhere. Do you realize the menu with the pancakes circled? They're not dead, they're being prepared for breakfast. He told us from the beginning, the pancake family. I will never look at breakfast the same way again. Thank you for listening. I need a moment. Hold your loved ones tight tonight, and if you hear strange noises, don't investigate alone. Jeff speaking. Have you ever looked up at the sky and seen something not quite right? Something moving slowly, silently, as if it doesn't belong to this world. The letter I'm about to read to you tonight was sent by a single mother in rural America. She and her 7-year-old son survived something my heart doesn't know what to call it. A phenomenon, a disaster, or something entirely different. She signed it Grace, and her story begins with a hot air balloon. It all started with a hot air balloon. It appeared on the horizon one early morning at the farthest edge of Caleb's field. At first, just a tiny dot, but as it gently drifted closer to my farm, it grew large enough to eclipse the sun. My son, Henry, was mesmerized. He'd never seen a hot air balloon in real life. He watched it drift closer, then ran out to the porch in his dinosaur pajamas and continued to watch it approach even more. As I sipped my coffee, I could hear the crackle of the flame keeping the colorful contraption aloft. It would stop and start periodically, flaring up in a burst of fire. My son waved excitedly, but his excitement dwindled as the balloon drew nearer. "Mom, there's no one in the basket," he said. I heard the burner crackle. "What do you mean, honey?" I asked through the open window. I bent down and looked up at the aerial object. Henry was right. No one was controlling the balloon. Strange, I thought it must have broken loose. There wasn't much wind that morning, but if someone hadn't tied it down securely, it could have drifted off. Out of curiosity, I grabbed my keys, buckled my son into the back seat of my truck, and chased after it. The balloon ran out of fuel and landed at the edge of my field, where I finally caught up to it. Caleb was already there, sitting on his four-wheeler and observing it with a puzzled expression. "Morning, Grace," he said, never taking his eyes off the object as the envelope portion deflated and sagged to the ground like curtains in the wind. "Morning, Caleb. Do you know what this wanderer is doing here?" I asked. I opened the back door to let Henry out. My excited son jumped out of the truck and dashed towards the balloon. Luckily, Caleb grabbed him by the shoulder and held him back. "No, son, it's not safe. It could catch fire, best to keep your distance," he told Henry. His gaze then turned to me. Not sure, I guess it's an escaped tourist attraction from a few towns over," I speculated. He rubbed his bushy chin. Maybe so." Henry struggled in his firm grip. "Mom, I want to go see." The fabric finally settled and covered a patch of ground. "It's safe now," Caleb said, nodding towards my son. I nodded back and he released Henry. My son shrieked and ran towards the basket. "Be careful not to touch the burner, honey, it's still hot." I called, hands on my hips. Caleb followed him at a much slower pace. "It's awful quiet this morning," he muttered. "Did you notice?" I shook my head. "With Henry around, it's never quiet," he chuckled. I quickened my pace as Henry climbed into the basket. Although I knew it was impossible, a small part of me feared the balloon would inflate and my son would float off into the sky, never to be seen or heard from again. Just one of those ridiculous automatic thoughts you have as a parent. Everything has the potential to be dangerous, even when it isn't. Fortunately, the balloon stayed put, and Henry ran around in the basket as if it were the best toy he'd ever seen. "Now don't break anything, Henry," I said, leaning over the edge of the basket. Caleb knelt, lifted the fabric, and examined it curiously. "Everything looks intact. Best not to leave it out here. Help me put it in the back of your truck. I'll store it in the barn until its owner shows up," I replied. "It's probably worth a fair bit of money. Someone's bound to claim it soon. Maybe I'll convince them to give us a ride as a thank you." I shooed Henry out of the basket and told him to sit in the truck while Caleb and I detached the fabric, rolled it up, and tossed it into the back of the truck. Then we grabbed the basket and lifted it. "Damn it," I whispered, straining to lift it. It was heavier than it looked. Sweat rolled down Caleb's face. "Probably the burner," I nodded. It wasn't easy, but we managed to get it into the truck. Caleb helped me secure it while Henry eagerly watched from the back seat. "Phew," I muttered, wiping my brow. I had second thoughts about bringing it into the barn. Maybe I'll just tarp it when I get home and finish up. Caleb wiped his hands on his jeans. "I gotta go. The wife will want to know what all the commotion was about." "Thanks, Caleb. You all stay safe," I replied. We both set off in opposite directions. Henry watched Caleb disappear over the horizon, then stared at our cornrows the rest of the way home. As we drove into the driveway, Henry said, "The scarecrow's doing a good job today." "What?" He pointed at the field. "Look." I followed his gaze to the scarecrow. For the first time in years, there wasn't a crow cawing around it or anywhere else on the property. That stupid thing never worked before. Don't know why it's working now. Oh, it's true. Caleb was right. There wasn't constant bird chatter, and with most animals still sleeping, it was quite quiet. So quiet that I could hear a low atmospheric hum echoing in the background. The kind of sound you only notice when everything else vanishes. It wasn't peaceful, nor was it unpleasant. It was just a continuous low sound, easily drowned out by my son's babbling. Spencer, our farmhand, arrived late that morning. I was washing breakfast dishes when I saw him drive up the lane. He had a bad habit of being late, so I wasn't too surprised when he rushed through the door, panting and apologizing. "Sorry, ma'am, this is the last time, I swear," he said. I looked at him unimpressed. "Did you hear what happened?" he asked. "The hot air balloon? Yes, I was there and I still managed to get back here in time for feeding the livestock." He hung his head in shame. "Sorry, ma'am," I sighed. "It's all right, just get to work, all right?" He nodded. Just as he was about to step out the door, we heard a loud explosion in the distance. "What the heck was that?" he asked, looking out at the field. "Transformer blow?" I suggested. "Too big for that," he replied. We stepped out onto the porch and scanned the area until we spotted a plume of smoke in the distance. "Looks like it's from the Burns field," he said. "Probably just their tractor." "Old Man Burns has been meaning to replace that old one for years. Guess the engine finally gave out," I replied, then nudged him slightly. "Come on, enough stalling, you've got work to do." His eyes remained fixed on the small smoke column for a moment, but eventually he nodded. Yes, sorry, ma'am." While Spencer twirled outside and Henry watched cartoons in the other room, I set about pickling daikon for storage. Near noon, Spencer finally reappeared. He was covered in dirt. "Took care of the livestock and everything, ma'am," he said. "Good job, Spence. I'll have lunch ready in a minute. Can you please do one last thing? There's no tarp in the barn. Please get it for me." "Sure, where exactly?" "Up in the hayloft, can't miss it. I'll be back in a minute," he replied. I watched him go into the barn while I tended to the fried potatoes. Then I waited. Waited a few minutes, then 5 minutes, then 10 minutes. What the heck was taking so long? I paced back and forth, annoyed. His truck was still in the driveway, so I knew he hadn't snuck off to flirt with some girl in town. With a grumble, I stomped into the barn, expecting to find him lounging around. I was about to scold him for being lazy. "Spence!" I called angrily as the door swung open. A ladder leaned against the hayloft, the tarp at its base. I grabbed the tarp and looked up, trying to find Spencer. "Spence, what are you playing at?" I called, no answer. "Spence, lunch is ready, get down here," I insisted, still nothing. Not even a creak from the wooden planks. All I could hear was the quiet hum from earlier that morning. A bit louder this time. If Spencer was up there, he was being perfectly silent and still. Two things he wasn't very good at. Tarp tucked under my arm, I grabbed the ladder and started to climb. I was about halfway up when I heard Henry call, "Mom, I'm hungry." "Yes, I have what I need. I have the tarp." Spencer can play his stupid games all he wants. I slid down and went back inside to serve lunch. "Where's Spencer?" Henry asked. "He's trying out a new dish with eggs and cold ham," I replied. "Gross." We finished lunch without a trace of Spencer. I started to get a little worried. He wasn't the most reliable person. He was often late and left early, but he never ran off in the middle of the day, and he certainly never left his truck behind. I decided I would go look for him when I finished the dishes. Henry was playing with his toys, and I was drying the last pot and pan. I probably never would have noticed if the sun hadn't been at just the right angle, casting a ray of light from the floor to the ceiling. Dust motes, they danced through the air currents in the room. However, about a minute below the ceiling, there was a visible reduction in density. I watched the tiny particles swim up and vanish beyond the invisible boundary. Strange, I thought, squinting at the empty space. Something about it made me uneasy, as if I knew something was wrong but couldn't quite put my finger on it. I looked outside, not a bird in sight for miles. I thought about the hot air balloon and how empty it was. I thought about Spencer in the hayloft. A bumblebee flew through the window, flew up past the invisible line, and disappeared. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. "I'm going to get the truck," Henry exclaimed as he ran towards the stairs. I grabbed him so fast he almost fell. "Don't go upstairs," I warned, my voice a mixture of stern resolve and fractured terror. I swallowed a lump of anxiety. My eyes were fixed on the perfect separation between dusty air and almost dust-free air. In that moment, I could only think of one thing, something I heard on TV. Dust is mostly made of old, dead cells. My blood ran cold. I could see it moving. The separation, I mean, slowly, like the movement of a setting sun on the horizon, subtle but definitely moving down. That's when I realized the hum from that morning was getting louder. We needed to get to lower ground. I thought I wasn't even sure what was happening, but I knew something bad would happen if we were caught under the invisible ceiling slowly descending on us. We lived on a plateau surrounded by mountains, the lowest point for miles. There was no lower ground except the cellar. Head bowed, I grabbed Henry's arm and pulled him towards the door. "Mom, what are you doing?" he whined, pulling back. I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. I closed the door tightly. Not sure if it would help keep it, whatever it was, out. The mere possibility that it might help was enough to give me some form of comfort. With my free hand, I grabbed the flashlight I kept on the top step and climbed down with my son into the cold, perfect cellar for storage. I had shelves with jars full of pickled vegetables, homemade jam, and canned meat lining every wall. The concrete room wasn't very appealing to a 7-year-old, so Henry usually stayed away unless I told him to get something for me. I breathed a sigh of relief and sat down at the bottom of the wooden stairs. I could hear frogs and crickets chirping happily outside. "Mom?" Henry asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I reviewed the facts in my head. Was I exaggerating? What had driven me to flee and hide? A runaway hot air balloon, a missing farmhand. "Mom, what?" "What, Henry?" I replied. He was jumping up and down from foot to foot. "What's going on?" I paused thinking, what should I tell him? I didn't even know what was happening, my eyebrows furrowed. "There's bad air up there like a fart," I sighed. "Yeah, something like that." I bowed my head and hid my face behind my hands. I was being stupid. At least that's what I thought. Until the sudden silence of the forest, as if all the frogs and toads in the creek behind suddenly held their breath. I found myself holding my breath, waiting for the sound to return, but all I heard were crickets. 10 minutes later, the crickets were silent. The void from the silence enveloped the room, unable to be filled even by the sound of Henry's feet running in circles, utterly bored. My fear only increased when I spotted the jars of meat on the top shelf in the corner. They were empty. I shined my flashlight up and looked at the dust motes in the beam. They vanished about 2 feet from the ceiling, just like upstairs, and like upstairs, the invisible division was lowering. All I could do was watch as, for an hour, the separation drew closer to my son and me until it was clear I couldn't sit on the stairs anymore. I pulled Henry into my lap and sat on the cold concrete floor, trembling as I watched the invisible ceiling descend on us. Occasionally, I had to shake the flashlight to get it to work again. I soothed my son gently. I prayed whatever was falling on us would stop and retreat. Prayed Henry wouldn't run around out of my reach. As it got closer, I lay down and told my son to do the same. We had to be as low to the ground as possible. "Don't move, honey," I told him. "Mom, what are you doing?" "We're playing dead, honey. If you do well, I'll bake your favorite cake," I promised. "But you have to be completely silent, okay?" "Okay," he said. I wasn't sure what to expect. Would it hurt when it happened? Would we disappear like the people in the hot air balloon? Could we be saved? I kept my hand on Henry's chest, pinning him down like a seatbelt. I could feel him trembling on the cold stone floor. I was afraid he would squirm and disappear forever. I should have brought a blanket, I thought. No blankets upstairs. Upstairs wasn't safe. A rock was digging into my thigh, but I couldn't risk moving. The threshold pressing down on us made me feel suffocated in the open room. I dropped the flashlight, squeezed my eyes shut, and held my breath for as long as I could. I waited, listening to the hum growing louder, like a bug circling my ear. I could feel Henry's body heat radiating from his chest. As long as I felt that warmth on my arm, I knew my son was okay. Even if I disappeared, at least he would be lower to the ground. Low enough to be safe, I hoped. We must have been there for at least an hour, maybe 2, before the sound became more distant. Henry had somehow fallen asleep despite the uncomfortable conditions. I opened my eyes, finally gathering enough courage to reach for the flashlight. I turned it on and carefully shined it at the ceiling. The dust hadn't returned, but I couldn't see the boundary anymore. Either we had been swallowed, or the phenomenon had passed. I was afraid to move at first, but eventually I raised my arm. Nothing happened. I sat up, still nothing. I breathed a sigh of relief. We had been spared. Somehow, by some miracle, we had been spared. When the hum completely disappeared, I cautiously climbed the stairs, keeping my head low. I opened the door and looked around. The sound was gone, the invisible division gone with it. It was over. After waking Henry and warming him up, I went out to the barn. It was empty, no birds, no livestock, not even a damn fly buzzing around the manure. Every animal on my farm was gone. We got into the truck and headed for town. As we passed the Burns farm, I saw their crop duster smashed to pieces in the field. Must have been the explosion Spencer and I heard earlier. I stopped to check, but the plane was empty. I knocked on the Burns door, but there was no answer. I drove to Caleb's farm and tried them. No answer. I drove into town. No one, not a single living creature, not even a damn squirrel. I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm afraid it's about to happen again. I can hear that hum in the distance. As much as I want to leave here, I can't risk it. I mean, the only way out of here is through the mountains, and I don't like going anywhere too high right now. I'll try my luck and hide in the cellar again. If you don't hear from me, it means we weren't lucky enough to be spared twice. An invisible force descends from above, swallowing every living thing in its path. Grace and Henry were lucky, or perhaps a mother's instinct saved them to lie very low, very still, as if playing dead. And perhaps, in a way, that's exactly what they needed to do. Do you hear that hum in the air tonight? Maybe it's just the air conditioning, maybe it's just the wind, or maybe you should check if the dust is disappearing anywhere. Jeff speaking. The night is drawing on, and the late-night story reading show is once again accompanying you through the quietest hours of the night. Next, I want to share a special letter with you. It was sent by a park ranger who has worked for nearly 20 years in a national park in the U.S. The sender did not leave their real name, only signed it as a worried ranger. And after reading the content, you'll understand why. The letter was written not long ago, but the story this person tells. Well, let me read it to you. Turn off the lights if you're brave enough. Hello, everyone. I've been a park ranger for almost 20 years now. The working procedures have changed a lot during that time. I'm writing this for the sole purpose of helping people stay safe when they venture into the wilderness. Let me tell you about the last park I worked at. I can't specify the exact location for fear of affecting my job. Anyway, we had clusters of campsites that were rotated annually. The idea was to prevent any one area from being overused and degraded, giving nature time to recover. Last winter was over, summer was approaching. In a few months, I was sent to inspect the campsites to decide which ones needed recovery time and which could be opened. Winters here are cold. Not many people camp in winter except for thrill seekers and scout troops led by self-proclaimed brave individuals. I didn't expect to encounter anything unusual. The first area was clean and ready to go. As I walked to the next area, I saw what looked like trash and belongings down in the river valley, looking like some assholes had set up an illegal camp there. Usually they leave trash and smoldering fires. Cleaning this place up would be a pain. I approached, saw traces of a grand party, belongings strewn everywhere, tent frames still erected, and blood. I stopped, time seemed to freeze. Pools of blood stained the ground, next to tracks of something heavy being dragged into the bushes. I pulled my radio from my belt and paused, then pulled my Glock 22 from its holster and loaded a round. I'm a certified law enforcement officer, but it had been a long time since I had to use a gun. I quickly scanned my surroundings for movement, then radioed for backup. While waiting, I listened in silence. Silence in nature is not a good thing. Prey goes silent when they sense a predator. I hoped the birds were silent just because of me. I moved forward, searching for people or anything. A plastic cooler was torn to shreds. A tent was completely destroyed, blood splattered on its walls and inside. Someone had died here. I knew it for sure. No one could lose that much blood and still walk away. But there was no body. Shreds of clothing, some internal organs attracting the damn flies, but no corpse. I've seen bears rummage through campsites and destroy anything that looked edible. There are wild boars here too. They create paths through deep brush and are even more dangerous than bears. But this wasn't their doing. The destruction here was too horrific. A plague from God had swept through here and torn everything apart. Finally, backup arrived, and I was asked to return to headquarters to report. They even brought medics. I didn't understand why. There was no one left to save. A rookie vomited at the sight of the scene. I was glad to leave that place. Back at headquarters, the atmosphere was agitated. Only 4 people worked here, but the phones rang incessantly, the printer ran non-stop, and the air felt electrified. The manager saw me and gestured me into his office. He was pale, like ash, with red-rimmed eyes. I sat down at the table, and he went to the door and locked it. I had never seen him lock that door. He asked me what I had seen. I recounted it without interruption. He looked even paler afterward, his hands trembling slightly. A very long silence. I waited for more questions. He didn't ask any. I left, then heard the door lock behind me. A few minutes later, I heard him on the phone with someone, a long and hushed conversation. I never saw him again. Orders came down from above. We had a new manager, whom he called excellent at crisis management. His first order, a controlled burn of the illegal campsite and nearby areas. I didn't object, watched the smoke rise in the distance, and prayed that was the end of it. New orders relocated the existing campsites closer to headquarters. Before doing so, we placed some trail cameras in the new locations to ensure we weren't in the middle of some nesting area. We also placed some cameras facing the wild boar trails through the brush, just in case. A few days passed, and we collected the data. The new manager took it all and started watching it in his office. A few hours later, he panicked, started screaming and yelling, picked up the phone, called his superiors, swearing terribly. He spent that day and night in his office calling experts and planners. The next morning, I attended a meeting. The manager looked like he hadn't slept. Major changes were coming. He presented a new plan that included ultra-bright light poles surrounding the park boundaries as well as floodlights around the ranger station. The campsites needed to move even closer. Clear visibility from the lights if possible. I interjected, saying that would defeat the purpose of camping if you only had to walk a short distance across the grass, then set up your tent close enough to see the parking lot. He told me to shut up. That was just the beginning. The park was now closed as soon as the sun set. Furthermore, we were required to carry rifles at all times. It's actually not uncommon for rangers to carry an AR-15 or a Remington 870 shotgun deep in the woods. There's a lot of wildlife and D-bags out there. The real worry is large-scale marijuana growers. These aren't your friendly neighbors hiding a few plants behind their tomato garden. They're all sorts, from large-scale suppliers who like privacy and hate cops, to anti-government crazies who think we have no right to them. True patriots. Both groups have some overlap. They're often well-armed, dislike law enforcement, and aren't afraid to take a potshot at some poor ranger who wanders onto their patch. Remember Elliot Ness? My grandfather said he beat Al Capone, but was scared off when busting Appalachian moonshiners because they kept sniping at his legs. They shoot to kill, that's why we kept big guns. Not for routine patrol. I drew the short straw and had to work the night shift. The manager said there would be more procedure changes when I returned. Night duty used to be easy. Monitor the radio, break up parties if needed, check for poachers operating nearby, ensure the forest isn't burning. I started my shift and followed the instructions to the gun locker. God, everything had changed. Our shotguns had new rifled barrels so they could fire slugs, the kind of firepower needed to take down a charging bear. If needed, the AR-15s were also upgraded. The old 15-round magazines were replaced with 30-round ones. Someone even secretly brought us hollow-point bullets. Ridiculous. Shooting in the woods requires full metal jacket rounds so the bullet doesn't veer off course when hitting branches. Hollow points are only for causing more tissue damage. It's absurd overkill. We're not a war zone. We don't need this kind of firepower. Next to the radio were new instructions. We were now not allowed to directly respond to emergency calls. We were allowed to answer, find out the problem, then report it to a new phone number I didn't recognize. Time passed slowly tonight. I wasn't even allowed to leave the building until dawn. A few quiet nights passed, the new floodlights and light poles strained my eyes, so bright that a blind person could see. A week later, some kids drove into the lot. They grabbed their backpacks and started climbing the hillside. I knew what they were up to. No one booked campsites tonight. These cheap kids were planning to camp and party loudly. I waited for the sun to set, confirming they weren't day hikers. I called the manager to report. He told me to call the new number that I report to them now. A blunt voice answered, asked which park, then paused, asked what the problem was. A bunch of kids in the unauthorized area. Should I go break them up? I see their campfire on the hillside right now. No, do not leave the building, do not attempt to make contact. That's all, report if there are new developments. Just after dawn, the manager drove in very early. Did you see them yet? Are they gone? No, the car is still there. Let them rest. Must be completely wasted. He swore nonstop, then went inside to make a call. I stood outside looking up at the hillside as he walked out of the station. An AR-15 in hand, another on his back, Glock on his hip. He walked purposefully towards his car. I tried to ask him what he was doing, but he didn't hear, didn't answer. He grabbed a can of gasoline from his car and climbed the hillside. I yelled after him, no response. I thought about following, but it didn't seem like a good idea. I went back inside and called that number, the same blunt voice, the same direct questions. Yes, the manager went up to that campsite, armed to the teeth and carrying gasoline. What should I do? Stay put, do not interfere. Backup is on its way. Report if there are new developments. At the same time, I started seeing smoke rise from the hillside. 2 vans sped into the parking lot at frightening speed. Over a dozen heavily armed and armored men quickly emerged. I went out to check. Who are you? What's going on? The men lined up with perfect military precision. A commander, I guess, stepped out of the last vehicle. He said, "Which way did he go? You mean he's up there?" I pointed to the growing smoke plume. The men fanned out and started running up the hillside. I heard them chamber rounds as they left. I tried to shout after them, but there was no response. I looked at the vans. They came in, nothing special, just rapid response team on the side. Half an hour later, they returned, dragging the manager. He was tied with zip ties. He screamed, "I did what needed to be done. Trust me, it's worse than they think. We can't stop it. Burn it all." They threw him into the back of a van and injected him with a sedative. The commander approached me. The hairs on my neck stood up in fear. "I need to see the office. All computers and anything with a hard drive will come with me." He mentioned videotapes. "I need them." I unlocked the door and they ransacked the place. Everything was taken. Reports printed over the past few years disappeared into the vans. Videotapes were bagged, and the commander himself carried them. He studied the gun locker. "You're not equipped enough," he sneered. Finally, they found everything they needed. The commander said, "Call that number, tell them it's under control. You need a new superior. Also, don't talk about this to anyone." They left, and just then, the fire department and a few news vans appeared. The fire was brought under control. The news reported unconfirmed rumors of missing campers. However, the rumors were enough to scare campers that season. The rapid change in management was attributed to bureaucracy, and the news cooled down after a week or two. The new manager was very good at handling them. Fortunately, no new campers, and now with shorter opening hours, we could do more work. Rebuilding the station took time, and we had just set up new campsites. They were practically a stone's throw from the station. Nothing dramatic happened for a few days. Then suddenly, the manager told us to place cameras around the station and the campsites. Usually there's a lot of human activity here, so we only saw raccoons. Maybe a rare hungry bear, but we humored him and put them everywhere. A few days passed and we collected the data. I was playing poker with a rookie while the manager watched hours of footage of the empty but brightly lit parking lot. Then he watched the data around the station. Screaming erupted from the office. We rushed in, and he was stomping on the camera hard drive, muttering things I didn't understand. Something about telling me it's clean, safe, no recent activity. "Nonsense, I won't do it," he yelled, motioning us out. Then he made a call. The rookie went to the door and eavesdropped. The rookie came back to report. "He's asking for a transfer, saying they lied to him about not doing a good job. He's not prepared or equipped here." Then I heard the phone disconnect and muffled sobs. A few hours later, the manager walked out of his office. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "We're cutting hours even further. In fact, only open on weekends. We'll be fully staffed those days, but only a few people on other days. Campers are required to register for one of the closest sites. No camping out, tell them to leave. We are not allowed to leave the station after dark under any circumstances. In case of emergency, don't call 911, call that other number and do exactly what they say." We drew straws for who would work the night shift. Why did we need to stay overnight? If we couldn't do anything, I didn't understand. I asked the manager about it, and he just said standard procedure was to have someone on duty to report anomalies overnight. I had the night shift. I kept the phone close, the number already dialed, ready if I needed to call. It was a terrible night. I just paced back and forth with my shotgun, glancing into the blinding floodlights, trying to see if there was anything out there. I heard crickets chirping, and it relaxed me. Prey is silent when predators are near. It was a long night. The next night, the manager drew the short straw. He seemed resigned. Eventually, we all had to do a turn. He carried the brightest tactical flashlight I'd ever seen, said he bought it because he was afraid of the dark. He wasn't really afraid, he was afraid of the things in the dark. I got a call at 3:00 a.m. It was him. "Get over here immediately and bring your gun." "What? You have an arsenal?" "Right now. Oh, I swear to God I've done it now. Oh no, I think they're attracted to the light." I called that number and they just said backup would arrive in the morning. Damn it, damn it. I heard gunshots crackling, more gunfire, screaming, struggling, the line cut off. I called that number, a new blunt voice answered. Listen, I work at Park X. I just spoke on the phone with. I just spoke with him. What can you report? Something bad is happening. Serious. I heard gunshots. We'll have backup there as soon as possible. Did he say anything else? Yes, he said he thinks they're attracted to the light. I don't quite understand. Interesting, thank you for your report. The park is now closed, you will be transferred. Goodbye. Click. Officially. The park was closed for a scheduled controlled burn to let old trees die and make way for new ones. Nothing in the official report about what happened to the manager on duty. The public understood that bureaucracy needed periodic reshuffling. No one asked any more questions. I was transferred to a new park half a country away, a change of scenery and beautiful. They also had some rules here. Don't go far after dark and don't carry a flashlight. I was worried about why I couldn't use a flashlight at night when needed. They didn't tell me. Stay safe, everyone. Jeff speaking. Here's another letter tonight, a short one, but perhaps the most heartbreaking I've received tonight. Sometimes the most horrifying stories aren't about monsters or ghosts. Sometimes they're about real people and the things they do to each other within the shadows of four walls. This letter came from a young woman, unnamed, signed only with her initial J. Enclosed in the envelope was also a crash report for a fatal car accident and a wedding photo torn in half. I will read it to you. But be warned, this is not a love story. This is a story of survival. I buried my fiancé on what was supposed to be our wedding day. He was killed in a hit-and-run accident just 3 days prior during his usual evening jog. I stood beside the coffin in my pristine white wedding dress. My hair was neatly pinned up under my veil, my bouquet clutched tightly in both hands, and I cried. My parents supported me, standing between them, and practically carried me to the car after the funeral, whispering words of sympathy and love. They couldn't know what I was feeling. No one could. They tried to persuade me to go home with them instead of returning to the house Brandon and I shared. But that was all I wanted, to be in my own space. Away from curious eyes, pity, and the kind, yet tiring, well-meaning condolences for the nearly widowed. Mom insisted on at least helping me out of the wedding dress. So I stood there, watching her in the mirror as she stripped away the last vestige of a future now buried 6 feet under. They offered to stay and cook dinner for me, clean up, anything to avoid leaving me alone. But I refused. I needed time to myself. When they had left, I walked slowly from room to room, leaning against door frames and reliving old memories of my time with Brandon. Just him, me, and this big house. I ran my fingers along the wall in the front hallway, found the crack he always promised to fix. The creak of the floorboards always let me know he was coming up the stairs. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, thinking of all the meals I had cooked for him, how I knew exactly how he liked his meat cooked or his preferred spice blend. I sat in his favorite chair in the living room, the one I always left empty for him, legs tucked up beneath me. The walls and fireplace told the story of our lives through photo frames. Beaming in swimsuits in Hawaii, laughing with friends in an Irish pub, cuddling together at a campsite in Maine. I couldn't count how many places we had been together in the last 7 years or how many friends we had made. We looked so happy, and now it was all over. At the ceremony, I listened to all the beautiful eulogies with tears streaming down my cheeks. Our friends and family recalled Brandon's best qualities. His kindness, his giving nature, his quick wit. They all had stories of times he was there for them and how he positively impacted their lives. I cherished their beautiful memories and cried even more as I listened. I had been unable to speak at Brandon's funeral. Not that anyone expected me to. Everything I was going through was still too raw, too painful. But here, in the quiet emptiness of the house, I could deliver my private eulogy for the man who was supposed to be my husband. I took a deep breath, organizing my jumbled thoughts into the words I needed to say aloud. Brandon, I said to his photos, my voice trembling with 100 emotions. We've been together a long time, and if things had gone as planned, we would have had a lifetime more to go. You promised me I'd always be your girl. You said we were meant to be, and you would do anything to keep us together. I paused, picking up our favorite engagement photo. I'm looking up at him, and he's looking down at me, both smiling, lost in love. I traced those smiles with my fingers and felt tears well up again. I'm glad you're dead, you son of a bitch. I carried the photo around the house with me, looking from the happy couple in it to the reality I had lived. The crack in the wall he always promised to fix after he threw me into it. The creaking floorboards that warned me when he was coming upstairs looking for me. Into the kitchen, where I spent a year being knocked to the floor before I learned how to cook meat exactly to his liking. Where he dumped an entire plate of food on my head when I recoiled because the seasoning wasn't exactly how he wanted it. Back to the living room and his favorite chair, where he sat drinking and screaming at me. I made the mistake of sitting in it once. Just once, a nearly broken rib taught me that lesson quickly. I turned back to look at the perfect life in the framed photos throughout the walls. All lies. We hid it so well, didn't we? No one suspected a thing. I reached for the Hawaii photo and smashed it to the floor. One by one, I started tearing them down, reveling in the sound of breaking glass, until only the intact engagement photo remained. I sat down with it, placing it on my lap. There were good times, all the things our friends and family recounted, and I was truly grateful for the reminder that there was still a human being somewhere inside the monster, the fear that had bound me to him for so long. I can still feel his fingers crushing my wrist, hear him hiss the last words he said to me. "You think you can leave me? I'll kill you before that happens. You're mine and always will be." And then he went for his jog as if nothing had happened while I cried on the floor. I carried the photo with me to the kitchen again and pulled the curtains aside to look out at the backyard. Dusk had fallen, casting a blue shadow over everything, including the tarp covering the '67 Mustang Brandon was restoring. He had just gotten the old beast running and was so proud. He made me watch him drive back and forth around the field behind the house, laughing triumphantly through the driver's side window the entire time. The body still looked like scrap metal, but the inside roared. After he left for his jog, I went and took his car. It was a bumpy, uncomfortable ride. Torn seats dug painful springs into my back. It was even bumpier when Brandon rolled under the wheels. I looked back once, saw him lying by the side of the desolate road, completely motionless. It was hard to breathe, hard to believe what I had just done, but not a single part of me regretted it. Back home, there was surprisingly little to clean up. And really, what's one more dent in the hood? I covered it with the tarp again, and the key was tucked into the front pocket of Brandon's suit. The one I chose to bury him in. I didn't realize I was crying again. Happy tears that had been flowing all day. I buried my fiancé on what was supposed to be our wedding day, and I started living again. Jeff speaking. There are kinds of horror we can switch off, the kind we can forget when we turn off the radio. And then there are kinds of horror that thousands of women are living with right now, in seemingly happy homes with beautiful pictures on the walls. The woman who wrote this letter, I don't know who she is, I don't know where she is, but I understand why she did what she did, and I cannot judge her. If you are listening and you are in a relationship that scares you, please know there are other ways out. There are people who will help you. You are not alone. And if you are the one causing that fear, remember that fear can turn into something else, something stronger, something uncontrollable. Jeff speaking. Hello again. Tonight is getting colder, isn't it? I just received a special letter, not from a complete stranger, but from a granddaughter who recorded her grandmother's story. A story of war, of family, and of sisterhood. Sometimes the scariest stories aren't about ghosts or monsters. Sometimes they're about what people do to each other when hatred is inflamed. And sometimes they're also about love that transcends even death. This letter begins with a simple sentence. I remember it like it was yesterday, though decades have passed. Listen to her story. I remember it like it was yesterday, though decades have passed. My sister and I were arguing again, as we often did, as I suppose most sisters do at that age. This argument was hotter than usual. I yelled an expletive in her face before turning to stomp out of the room. But then my neck snapped back abruptly in pain, and I realized she was pulling my hair. Hurt and shocked, I spun around and slapped her hard across the face. We didn't often get physical, but when we did, we didn't hold back. I didn't know where it would end, how much the violence would escalate. But suddenly Nano appeared. That's what we called my paternal grandmother. She had some form of dementia, and between that and her thick accent from her old country, she rarely spoke. She was a tiny, pale, fragile ghost who lived on the periphery of my life, barely making an impression. That day was an exception, demonstrating an unexpected ferocity. She wedged herself between my sister and me, looking back and forth at each of us with a furious expression. She stared at my sister's hand, still tangled in my long hair, then looked back at her face. My sister awkwardly released her grip and let her arm fall to her side. Sisters must love each other, she shrieked at us, her voice shedding much of its usual frailty. Don't do this, love your sister, love. Suddenly, the mask of anger cracked, slipped, and dissolved into grief. Where seconds before there had been pure anger, now there was only sorrow and loss, and she covered her small, wrinkled hands over her mouth. But I could see her pale, gray-brown eyes welling up. Without another word, she turned and hurried out of the room as fast as her arthritic legs would allow. While her shoulders shook with silent sobs, my sister and I stared at each other, shocked by Nano's uncharacteristic anger and uncharacteristic sadness. We stood there stunned and silent for about 20 seconds, then I turned and ran after her. Of course, Nano was in the kitchen making tea. While she was generally quiet and caused no trouble, her tea-making habit was a source of family conflict. You see, she never made just one cup. Every time she wanted tea, she would make 4 cups, then only drink one of them. While the other 3 grew cold, my mother was furious at the waste. The economy wasn't good, and my father's job was on the verge of layoffs. He wasn't paid much to begin with, but if he lost even that meager income, well, that was a source of stress for all of us. Looking back, I wonder if that's why my sister and I fought so fiercely: the fear of scarcity. As expected, Nano was carefully lifting 4 porcelain teacups down from the cupboard, and as I stepped beside her, she placed them carefully in the center of 4 saucers already on the kitchen counter. I heard a gentle clink as the 4th was set in place. "Nano, stop," I said gently. "Why don't you sit down? I'll make you tea, okay?" She turned to look at me as I spoke, and I saw her eyes had become dreamy and distant again, as they often were. But then they sharpened, and I could tell she was really seeing me. "Why are you children fighting?" she asked softly, and gently placed an unbelievably soft hand on my cheek. It was cool against my skin, which was still hot with anger. I had no answer for her, not then, so I continued. "Just sit down, Nano, rest. I'll make the tea while you sit and rest." She cast an anxious glance at the 4 neatly arranged cups, then looked back at me. Her mouth opened as if to protest, but then, with a nod, she shuffled to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. I didn't want to make a fuss, so I quickly and carefully put away 2 cups and saucers while she was distracted, then put the kettle on the stove. I rinsed the old tea leaves from the pot, replaced them with fresh ones from the jar, then approached Nano while waiting for the water to boil. "Just a minute," I said, a little too cheerfully. To me, my forced cheerfulness sounded too obvious to be believed. But she smiled at me. "Thank you, Anna," she said. I didn't know who Anna was, but I smiled back and humored her. "It's nothing. A hot cup of tea makes everything better, doesn't it, Nano?" Her smile faded and she looked confused. Then I saw recognition in her eyes, followed by sadness. "I'm sorry, child," she said, sounding more lucid. "You're not Anna. She's been gone for a long time. Sometimes I forget." The kettle's whistle signaled the water had boiled, so I crossed to the stove and turned the burner knob to the off position. "Who's Anna?" I asked, desperate to make some conversation. Who is Anna? Oh, sorry." In my head, I was cursing my stupidity, but on the outside, I just kept my smile fixed and made the tea. Nano was silent until I brought the steaming teapot over, followed by the cups and sugar and milk. With everything ready, I sat down opposite her and began to pour the tea. "She loved her sisters," she said softly. "Oh, you have sisters?" I asked, and a blush spread across my face. It was embarrassing to realize I knew almost nothing about her. I didn't even know she had sisters. That was something I should have known, wasn't it? I slid her teacup across the blue Formica tabletop, and she stared at it for a long time, then she began to tell me a story. Anna was the eldest. She was short but had a big heart. You know, her hair was long and black and curly like yours. She loved her sister's hair. Hers was ugly, she thought so. Not black, not blonde, not brown, nothing. And she was jealous of her sister's glossy black hair. Next was Slavka. She had a wonderful mind. She read and read. We were very poor and books were very expensive. But she always found books to read somehow. She was very kind to her. Then Yuna was sweet. She was the prettiest but not vain. She was funny, she made her laugh and laugh. Somewhere else she would have been a movie star. She said we were poor but life was good enough. Mother was taken by the flu before she was old enough to remember. But her sisters were her mothers. Anna was strong, good at making decisions. Slavka was gentle and caring. Yuna was joyful and playful. Father worked so hard she barely saw him, and when he was home, he was always tired. Together, her sisters raised her. We could have gone on like that forever if the war hadn't come. She was too young to understand what it was about. She didn't know who our enemies were, and she had no reason to think that not everyone in the village was a friend. To some people, you see, we were outsiders. They didn't trust our people, viewed us as intruders on their land. She was an innocent child, and she never realized that. But as the hatred of war spread across the country, old suspicion grew into something worse. It was midwinter when the soldiers came. Late at night, Anna woke her, telling her to be silent. She heard murmurs outside, growing louder as she gathered with her sisters in the small, cold, dark kitchen that winter night. Father hadn't come home from work, so it was just the four of them. Her sisters hissed at her to stay out of sight, but she peeked through the window. The soldiers were accompanied by a mob of villagers. The baker who sold us bread every day was among them, so was the schoolteacher. They carried burning torches and sticks, and their faces were like emotionless stone. The soldiers carried guns as she watched them kick in neighbors' doors and run inside. There were screams and shouts, then the popping sound of gunfire. The screams and shouts stopped, and she heard Una sobbing silently. Our neighbors were also our people, and innocent as she was, she understood we would be next. Anna took charge as she always did, rushing us to get boots and cloaks and scarves. We didn't have warm coats or proper boots, but what choice was there? As soon as we were ready, Anna led us to the back door. The noise of the mob had grown louder, and as she lifted the latch as gently as possible, we heard the front door being hammered. "Open up, traitors," a mocking voice yelled. "If you cooperate, we might just arrest you." Without a word, we slipped out into the cold night. Slavka, smart as ever, turned and closed the door behind us, leaving no trace for our pursuers. Then we went. Our house bordered the forest. In the moonlight, the bare trees were like black skeletons clawing at the sky. The nearly full moon made the falling snow glow with an eerie pale blue. Anna led the way, stamping a path for our small feet through the crunchy snow, then Una and her, and Slavka followed. She realized we were heading for Aunt's house. Aunt married Father's older brother, a lumberjack, but he was killed by a falling tree before they had children, years before she was born. For as long as she knew, Aunt lived alone in a small hut in the forest. The town children whispered she was a witch, but to her, she was just Aunt. The snow crunched and squeaked as we ran, and within minutes her poor little feet were numb. Her tattered old shoes were barely enough to get her to the market and back. In the snow, she was practically barefoot. She whimpered, asking Anna for a piggyback, but she told her to be quiet. She was about to complain again, but then she heard voices behind them yelling. Anna tried to speed up, but she was slowing the others down. The voices grew louder, and when she looked back, she could see the faint orange glow of their torches. It was smart Slavka who realized they were following fresh footprints in the snow. There was no way to hide their tracks, so she suggested they split up. At a small clearing, she suggested Anna take her straight to Aunt's house. But she and Una should go in two different directions to confuse the mob. In the moonlight, she could see Anna was unsure, but time was short and she quickly nodded. "Run around," she instructed the other two. "Don't give them a clear trail. Get to Aunt's house as fast as you can." Then Una went to the left, her blonde curls turning silver in the moonlight. She heard Anna whisper, "Be careful." A moment later, Slavka also went, heading to the right. The cold in her feet could not compare to the icy feeling in her heart as her sisters disappeared into that bitter night. Soon, they were out of sight, and the rustling footsteps through the snow were swallowed by the trees. Anna turned back to her and asked if she still wanted a piggyback. She nodded enthusiastically, and her sister knelt for her to climb on. Then we went. As she bounced up and down, she buried her face in Anna's black curly locks and tried not to notice the pursuit behind them. She didn't know how long her sister ran. Countless trees slowly drifted by behind them, each looking identical. Nothing around looked familiar, and she hoped Anna remembered the way. Her sister's breathing became ragged and short, and halfway up a slope, she stopped. She lowered herself onto an old, rotting fallen log, and as she panted, she could see white clouds of vapor puffing from her mouth. She released her sister and stood on the log. Looking back, she could still see a faint torchlight, but it didn't seem any brighter. Slavka's plan seemed to have worked. She asked if her sisters were okay, and Anna said, "Of course." She was a terrible liar, but the little girl believed her. With nothing else to do, she brushed off a patch of snow and sat down beside her sister. They were still sitting there when they heard gunshots echoing through the forest, faint. Then she could hear the mob roaring. It no longer sounded like a group of people. It sounded like monsters, and she supposed that's exactly what it was. Leaning against Anna for warmth, she felt her sister flinch. She jumped up and looked back, and she heard her sister's breath catch in her throat. "Slavka," she whispered, and she could feel her sister's despair. "Smart Slavka," she declared with defiant stubbornness. "Those bad men didn't catch her." Anna looked at her. The moon was behind her sister, so her face was in shadow. But she heard her say, "Of course, smart Slavka, we'll meet her at Aunt's house." As she had said, she was a terrible liar. A moment later, there was another gunshot, then two more in quick succession. These sounds clearly came from the left and were closer than the last. Muffled by the snow and softened by the trees, there was still no mistaking the cheers and yells of the men. Even at that age, she understood they had made hunting them a game. Shockingly close, right behind them, she heard a man laugh, then another laugh in response. They had split into 3 groups for the chase. Slavka's plan had failed, and a portion of the mob was hot on their heels. Anna's head whipped back and forth desperately, trying to decide what to do next. Suddenly, she grabbed her wrist and pulled her into the log. She whispered. She hadn't noticed that their temporary seat had a small hollow. "I won't fit," she whispered. "Yes, you will," Anna hissed back. "Come on, hurry." Realization dawned. Her sister wouldn't fit. Without her baby sister on her back, she could run much faster. She said, "Please, I'll help you in." Anna picked her up and pushed her into the rotting hollow, feet first. "Help me," her sister mumbled, and she wriggled backwards with her elbows. Anna glanced back at where they had come from. The voices were getting very close. Her head fit perfectly into the log, but her hips had reached the narrow point, and she couldn't slide any deeper. "This will have to do," Anna declared and placed a slender finger over her lips. "Whatever happens," she whispered intensely, "stay silent." "But what about you?" she replied, and she could feel tears freezing on her cheeks. "I'll run like the wind, they'll never catch me." She kissed her fingertip, then dabbed it on her nose. "I'll see you soon, little sister." And then she was gone. She cried silently. As she had said, her sister was a terrible liar. Her sister's footsteps crunched in the pristine snow as she hurried away, and soon the sound was lost in the trees. She started to get very cold, and her tiny teeth began to chatter. She didn't hear the men approach. They must have been trained soldiers because they moved silently and had no lights. The first thing she knew of them was when the log gently swayed, and she heard the snow crunch softly. She stuck 2 fingers into her mouth, terrified that her chattering teeth would reveal her. There was conversation, but she couldn't repeat it. They talked about what they wanted to do if they caught a girl. She didn't understand the words they used. She was very young and innocent, you must remember. But she could hear the cruel, joyful tone in their whispered voices. They only sat for a while, catching their breath, then they left, and she barely heard them go, following the tracks Anna had made through the snow. Time passed. She heard no gunshots. At one point, she thought she might have heard a scream, but it was so faint she wasn't sure. Strangely, she thought she had fallen asleep. A long time later, someone called her name. She tried to listen, but thinking was very hard. She thought by now she must be on the verge of dying of cold because it was so hard to concentrate on the person talking to her. "Come on," they said. "We have to go to Aunt's house." "I can't," she said pitifully. "I'm stuck." "You're not stuck, you're just cold." She was vaguely aware of a figure standing before her, but the moon had set low, and it was hard to see clearly. "Anna," she murmured. "Of course," her sister replied. "I told you I'd come back." A tiny flicker of hope blossomed in her small mind, and she really tried to move. The rottenwood gripped her tightly, but she could feel it loosening. "Come on, we have to go." Anna turned and started to walk away, and she thought her sister would abandon her again. She found strength then, wiggling like a worm, and managed to pull her arm out, then easily pushed the rest of herself free. Her joints ached as she stood up and looked around. No one was there. "This way, silly." Anna's gentle voice echoed from up the slope, and she saw her sister's shadow. And she staggered through the snow towards her sister and asked for a piggyback again. "Not now, little one, you have to use your own legs." The second part of the flight to Aunt's house was much harder. The snow seemed deeper and harder, and of course she had to walk the entire way herself. Soon her little legs were exhausted, and she knelt in the snow. "I know you're tired," a gentle voice said, "but you must keep going." Somehow she jumped up. "Slavka!" The moon was almost gone, and it was very dark, but she could see her sister standing in the snow some distance away. "You thought the bad men?" she stammered. She had no words. "You're very close to Aunt's house," her sister said. Her voice was full of love and kindness. "Just a little further and you'll be there, and Aunt will make you a hot bowl of oatmeal with dried apples." With her sister's encouragement, she somehow stood up and stumbled on. She called Anna, but her sister didn't answer. Slavka wasn't there either. Vaguely, she wondered where they were, but most of her attention was focused on the task of putting one foot in front of the other. She didn't know where she was going, but she tried to follow the direction she had last heard Anna's voice. She trudged for what seemed like hours, and then she heard a voice to her right. "Wrong way," it said. She looked, and although it was very dark, she could see someone walking into the trees. They had long, curly hair that was steel-colored in this faint light, but it would probably be golden in daylight. Yuna, she called. Her sister didn't turn back, simply said, "Follow me to Aunt's house." So she followed. Like a ship following the beam of a lighthouse, she stumbled miserably through that freezing forest, following the torch of Yuna's golden hair. And then, just like that, she arrived. The amber glow of lamplight spilled from a small window, and under the gray pre-dawn sky, she recognized the hunched shape of Aunt's small hut. "We're here!" she exclaimed joyfully and turned back to find her sisters. In the golden light from the window, she could see them standing at the edge of the forest, all three holding hands. "Come on." She yelled, "Let's eat porridge." She recognized a taller fourth woman standing behind her sisters. She didn't know her, but she seemed familiar. Her kind eyes looked like Slavka's, and the corners of her mouth crinkled with laugh lines that reminded her of Yuna. The protective way she wrapped her arms around her sisters was strangely like Anna. She said nothing, just gave her a long, sad look before leading her sisters back into the forest. From behind, she could see her hair. It had no color, not black, not blonde, not brown, nothing. It was beautiful. Nano fell silent, and I realized her story was over. Paralyzed, I reached for the teapot to pour more tea, but found it was empty. Without a word, I stood up and rinsed the leaves, then refilled the kettle with water and placed it back on the stove. I stood in silence while waiting for the water to boil, then made a fresh pot of tea. I placed the tea on the table, then returned to the cupboard. Carefully, I set out 3 more clean saucers, then placed a cup in each. Lifting the pot, I poured each cup full in turn, then Nano's cup, and finally my own. We drank tea in silence. There was nothing more to say. 3 sisters who sacrificed their lives so their little sister could survive. And they still led the way for her even after. That's why she always made 4 cups of tea. 1 for her and 3 for the sisters who never got the chance to grow up, never got the chance to drink tea with their little sister. Love, sometimes, it's stronger than death. Jeff speaking. Welcome back. Before we get to our final story of the night, I have one more letter to share. This letter comes from a man who claims to be able to see 10 billion colors. 10 billion, while most of us can only see 1 million. Have you ever wondered what the world truly looks like? If our eyes could see everything, perhaps it's better not to know. This man learned that lesson the hard way. This is his story. There are secrets hidden in colors you cannot see. Do you know what dust color is? If you say no, then you're wrong. It's vis-colored, and there's a little bit of Fortis color too. That's not gibberish. Those are colors you cannot see. But I can. I am the first human recorded with tetrachromatic vision. That means I have 5 different types of cone cells in my eyes. Most people have trichromatic vision, meaning they have 3 types of cone cells in their eyes. Each of these cells can distinguish about 100 individual shades, but they blend together. That means the average trichromat can see about 1 million different colors. As a tetrachromat, I can see about 10 billion colors. No other mammal does that. Only pigeons and a few species of butterflies. If this doesn't sound very important, then let me ask you a question. What's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? A sunset? A rainbow? Mine was a Twinkie. I was in a 7-Eleven and saw a stack of them in a box on a shelf. Whatever chemicals they put in those things have their own colors. Combined, they create a beautiful swirling mosaic that makes the Twinkie less appealing to eat but certainly more beautiful to look at. These colors are inexpressible. I mean, literally, I cannot describe them to you. Color is an inherently private event. Just as you can't know if the shade of blue you see on the "I can't believe it's not butter" lid is the same blue your boss sees, I can't tell you what most of the colors I see look like. There are things I didn't even know had color until I became a tetrachromat. Movement has color. Every time something moves, it creates a blur of color that I can only describe as energetic. I call this color vis. Most fruits are multicolored, but trichromats only perceive the main colors present in them. If peaches look to you the way they look to me, you probably wouldn't eat them anymore. I wasn't born with tetrachromatic vision. I was born with boring trichromatic vision like you. Then I got into a car accident. Do you know what color the sparks are when 2 pieces of metal collide? I call it ank. That's the sound my wife's car made when it hit the Subaru next to us. It's actually a pleasant color. It evokes a feeling similar to when you smell wood smoke. Blood isn't just red anymore, it also has the color crew. Blood was the last thing I saw before I lost my sight. Victoria was driving. She was drunk, but not as drunk as I was. We were arguing. It was my fault. Did she deserve it, John? Did she deserve for everything we had together to end? No, she didn't deserve it. Hiring a prostitute was never something I thought I would do. Losing my marriage was never something I thought I would do, but I was bored with our marriage. I wanted something new. I didn't know that wanting something new meant she would let go of the wheel. As the car veered off the road, I tried to pull the steering wheel back. I pulled too hard. We crashed into a car that had just moved into the right lane. A 17-year-old girl was behind the wheel. The impact broke her spine. She died in her own pool of blood. Our car spun and crashed into the median. Victoria was thrown from the car. The seatbelt pinned me to the seat. The windshield shattered into a million pieces. Shattered glass had a whole range of colors present in it, too many to name. A shower of glass rained down on me. It cut through my skin like it was cutting clay. 2 large pieces lodged into my eyes. The last thing I saw was blood. The last thing I heard was Victoria screaming. "Oh God, it hurts so much. Please God, it hurts." I'm not sure when I woke up. Without sight, I drifted helplessly in a sea of darkness. After a while, I heard a voice asking if I could hear her. It was a woman's voice, a nurse. "Yes, where am I?" She said I was in the hospital and had been in an accident. I couldn't see her face, but I could tell she was frowning as she told me I would be blind for life. Turns out, you don't need eyes to cry your eyes out. That's all I did in those early days. No doctor could help me. After a week of living in my own darkness, someone above took pity on me. They called a specialist. He was working on an experimental procedure. "How much money?" "No charge, I'll do the procedure for free." He had a greasy southern accent. "What's the catch?" This southern gentleman came from an experimental facility in Gilman County, Colorado, doing research on biomechanical enhancements. They needed someone whose eyeballs had been destroyed but still had active optic nerves. Someone who still had full brain function and could describe what they saw. Someone desperate enough not to mind being a guinea pig. That was me. The surgery lasted 4 hours. They had warned me beforehand that the experimental eyes would be stronger than my original eyes. They didn't warn me that my tetrachromatic eyes would see things humanity shouldn't see. After the procedure, the first thing that struck me was my fingernails. They had colors in a way I had never seen. I asked the nurse if she had nail polish on. She didn't. Her fingernails also had color. Turns out fingernails aren't colorless. They have a color I call fortis. It's probably better that you can't see it. It's not a pretty color. The nurse's breath had a color I call nubila. Most people's breath is still colorless to me, but if a person smokes regularly enough, it becomes nubila. Getting used to being able to see again meant getting used to all the new colors. Everything looked different than before. People's faces had such complex colors that it was easier to identify someone by the random patches of color on them than by the actual shape of their face. It's funny how much struggle there is over skin color in the world. Because when you can see 10 billion colors, the tiny shade differences between black and white don't make a difference. Sometimes I think my new vision is a positive thing. But then I remember the first time I set my new eyes on my wife. I remember things no man should ever have to see. The first time I saw her was 2 months after the accident. Victoria was more severely injured than I was. When she was thrown from the car, the bones in both her arms and legs shattered. Bone fragments tore through muscles quite badly. It took 12 hours of surgery to save her life. They had to amputate all of them. Her skin was so severely burned by the asphalt that she had to have 4 skin grafts to reconstruct her face. They never got it quite right. I thought I was prepared for Victoria to be quadriplegic. The doctors explained her condition beforehand and warned it would be awful. They warned me her limbs would just be stumps, but they couldn't see what I could see. They couldn't warn me that there was still something where her limbs used to be. 4 ghostly masses extended from her bandaged arms and legs. They had the shape of the missing parts but were twisted and bent at strange angles. When she moved her stumps, the masses followed as if they were the original limbs, albeit broken. They had a color I call anima. I'm afraid to see the color anima. It appears in very consistent circumstances. Most amputees have anima limbs growing from their stumps. The air around cemeteries and crematoriums is tinged with anima. Occasionally, the meat you buy at the grocery store has an anima aura emanating from it, but only when it's truly fresh. For a while, I thought anima was the color of death. Last week, I learned what it truly is. Victoria died last Monday. It had been almost a year since the accident. I guess it was her time. My wonderful Victoria fought as hard as she could, but eventually, her body gave up. She died in bed while I was showering. My heart broke when I found her. Only when she was gone did I realize how much I had taken her presence for granted. I called 911 and lay down beside her while waiting for the ambulance. Her last days were difficult for both of us. Even with heavy medication, Victoria experienced constant phantom pain in her missing limbs. On the nights she could sleep through the pain, she often had vivid dreams of the accident. I tried to push the thought of it from my mind, but I recalled the accident every time I looked at her ghostly limbs. When her time came, I secretly hoped her passing would be a relief for both of us. It was a beautiful funeral. I chose the flowers. She would have loved them, even if she couldn't see all the colors in them like I could. When I returned home, I noticed a stain on the bed where her body had lain. It looked familiar. It was anima, the color of her ghostly limbs. I changed the sheets. After a few hours, another stain. I changed them again. The stain returned. No matter how many times I washed the sheets, the stain returned. I started sleeping on the sofa to get away from it. Looking at the anima-colored fabric only reminded me of her death. 2 days ago, I was in the bedroom getting dressed and noticed the stain was gone. In the space a few inches above where it used to be, there was now a cloud of anima color floating in the air. It was moving. Over the next few hours, the cloud took on a human shape, the shape of my Victoria. Last night, the anima cloud got out of bed. Its movement was painfully slow, but somehow very human. This morning, it stood in the kitchen as I made breakfast. I tried to ask my neighbor if he could see the form, but he just looked at me as if I were insane. Only my special eyes could see the anima form. It had no face or anything, but I could still tell it was staring at me. It followed me everywhere. It sat in the passenger seat when I drove, stood beside me at the bank, watched me shower. It's right behind me even as we speak. A shadow of my dead wife of an indescribable color. Staring at me, watching me with non-existent eyes. I've tried to run from it, but it always catches up to me. It refuses to leave me alone. Anima doesn't stop following me. Anima is not the color of death. The thing following me cannot die because it always knows where I am. It moves just like Victoria used to move. It's her. I know it's her. Now I see anima clouds like her everywhere, following everyone. They take the shape of our loved ones, those who cannot bear to be separated from us. Most people have one. If you've lost a loved one, then perhaps you do. Only my eyes can see them. If it truly is you in that cloud, then I'm sorry for everything I did wrong. I'm sorry for all the words I didn't get to say. Please don't follow me anymore. I just want to be alone. I know you can read this. Stop staring at me, Victoria. I don't think anima is the color of death. The things that follow us are alive, at least in their own way. They are the souls of the departed, trapped souls. Souls that cannot stop following us. Humans were never meant to see anima. We were never meant to know what happens when we die. I see colors you cannot, and they hide a terrible secret. There is no heaven or hell. When we die, we don't move on. We stay and watch silently until the end of time. Please leave me alone, Victoria. Stop staring at me. Jeff speaking, 10 billion colors, and among them a color we should never see. Anima, the color of souls. This man discovered a terrifying truth: the dead don't leave. They stay, watching forever, attached to those they loved or perhaps those they couldn't let go of. Victoria watched him, not out of love, perhaps because of unspoken words, unforgiven sins. He betrayed her, and now she will never let him forget. I wonder how many of you right now are being watched by invisible anima clouds. Your departed loved ones standing right behind you, staring with non-existent eyes. Perhaps it's better that we cannot see everything. Perhaps our limited vision is a blessing, not a curse. And now, my friends, we come to our final story of the night. The most terrifying story about a creature that feeds on vital energy. I apologize in advance. I am sorry, truly sorry, reader. I've been advised to open up and share my experience, as I no longer have any conscious connections in the waking world. I know that right now I am just a stranger to you, but I need to share this with someone, anyone. Besides the hospice caregiver who comes to the house, my only companion lies unconscious in the living room. He is everything to me. If he goes, I don't know what will happen to me. There's no way for me to prepare for such a loss. I feel so alone. His body speaks to me through the whispers and gasps of the ventilator. Occasionally, a mechanical beep breaks the silence. Now it's just us, and I am grateful that I can still thread my hand into his, rest my head on his chest, and listen to his heartbeat. He is still here. He is still here. This is my story. Please take some time out of your day to read it, to absorb it into yourself. I need a hug right now. I need so many things. Brenna wasn't always this way. Before Brand consciously and normally entered my life, I was surrounded by a generic loneliness. At first, I saw myself as an outcast. Like a magnet, I repelled most people. That was the easy thing to do. My mother believed in curing emotional ailments by changing geography, and the constant label of the new kid made it difficult for me to form lasting friendships. But the more we moved, the more I realized I was more like a domino architect. Instead of repelling potential friends, I had the misfortune of arranging events to push everyone away from me. They all fell when I met Brand. My father was the first casualty. I couldn't help but be born my father's daughter. On one of the rare occasions my mother sat down to talk to me, she told me he was infatuated with his newborn daughter's curly black hair. The laughter in my eyes as I babbled and reached for him. Being a father was a cloak he wore with pride. Before me, he practiced law with my mother at a small, successful firm in the city. Always the more competitive one, the career chaser, it was a surprise to my mother and the firm when he put it all aside to raise me. So my mother worked, and my father put his career on hold after I was born. In those early years, we were an ideal family. Mother worked late into the night, and father took care of me and ushered me into childhood. He stuffed Polaroids of me into my mother's lunch box, and she had bundles of them all over her office. Our two smiling faces. He homeschooled me through elementary school, taking me across the country, showing me history, teaching me geometry through beer, astronomy through a telescope, geology by digging in the mud. We adventured. He was my whole world, my best friend. When father fell ill, my mother was devastated. In fact, he had hidden his illness from her for a few years. Perhaps from himself too. Illness sneaks up on you like that. Sometimes you feel more tired than usual than weaker, and we can easily attribute it to aging, to the burdens hanging around our necks. Parenting is hard, so he put me first always, I guess, until the very end. Then he passed away, and it was just the two of us and the Polaroids. Mother had given me stacks of photos from her office. She kept a picture of just the two of them in a small frame on her desk from when they first started dating. They had gone to a photo booth on their second or third date, and he had kissed her in the last picture. The thin frame protected their unlined faces, smiling and carefree. Moments long lost. As a child, I knew my mother didn't handle his loss well. Instead of stepping back from trying to become a partner at the law firm, she worked harder than ever and was rarely home. Instead, she provided me with an endless stream of nannies. Like any mother, she ensured her little girl was well cared for. I had a few memorable ones who stayed. Gerda with her fiery red hair and uncanny ability to always have warm honey bread for breakfast. Sonia and her perfect eyebrows and patient hands that taught me mandolin. Mad and her daughter who played dolls with me tirelessly. Some nannies stayed longer than others, but as soon as I connected with them, a new one would replace them. The revolving door of temporary nannies continued until I was in high school. Mother moved us when a better opportunity arose for her. And that meant I rarely had enough time to put down roots or develop attachments in one place. I have pictures of all of them, pictures and memories, and it still brings tears to my eyes to think of all those goodbyes. The nannies did what they could for me so I could grow into a strong woman. I feel many of them tried to fill a bit of the motherly role I lacked. To this day, I am so grateful to have had so many women I could admire and learn from. Without them, I'm not sure I'd be here today. I was in high school when my mother deemed me too old to need a nanny and granted me the privilege of autonomy. The bus line picked me up at home and dropped me off on time every day. Back home, I knew how to prepare dinner, then would embark on my routine of cleaning and homework. I spent most of my free time reading or crocheting and watching television. The characters created in books and on screen somewhat soothed my longing for companionship. This was the time when dreams began, when I started to feel lonely. Isolated like that, you develop a hunger for social interaction, like the feeling when you skip breakfast. It's there, knocking behind your eyes, and as long as you're focused on doing something, you won't notice. Everyone dreams every night. We mostly don't remember our dreams, but for those who do, it can range from absurd to comforting to terrifying. As a girl living almost alone, I began to look forward to dreams. Sometimes father would be there, and we would do things like fly over the Colorado mountains and the redwoods in Oregon as if the states were sewn together. We would sit on the president's noses at Mount Rushmore. Sometimes I dreamed that while cleaning, I found new and hidden rooms in the house, and he lived there. The kitchen pantry had a false panel, and I could squeeze myself through somehow to find a new hallway that smelled like him. My bare feet could feel the dusty floorboards as I found his room and study in our first house. I would wake up exhilarated and ready to jump out of bed to tell Mom, only to find my cheeks wet, realizing I had dreamed. There was no false panel in the pantry. I had checked at least a dozen times. Father was gone. I was alone. Then I dreamed of the nannies taking me home. Of Sonia and her mandolin weaving me a perfect blanket of blues, greens, and purples. As we sipped hot cocoa by the fireplace with records playing, Gerda would pick me up and declare me the best friend she'd never had before. And we would review her rock collection, touching each stone as I recounted its story. Mad and her little girl would hold my hand and take me into the garden, and we'd make wreaths with wildflowers and weeds. We'd skip rocks across the still lake in Maine and stain our mouths with fresh blackberries to the chorus of crickets. And every morning, I woke up alone. I packed my lunch, brushed my hair, put on my uniform, and rode the bus to school. At school, the noise of the teenagers around me made me feel even more alone. Forming friendships wasn't as easy as it was in my dreams. I tried. I formed flimsy acquaintances that allowed me to sit with them at lunch. As a good student, I never had trouble finding a group to work with for a project, and I endured mediocre athletic ability by teaming up with similar people in gym class. Occasionally, I was invited to birthday parties. I ate cake and enjoyed hanging out with people my age, but I always felt like an outsider or an add-on. I wasn't bullied or teased, but I wasn't liked enough to form ready friendships I could call from a memorized phone number. Girls either didn't have room in their friend circles, or I didn't live in a place long enough to find my way in. I could get people to talk to me, but I never got them to listen or make a connection. Friendship was one-sided. I couldn't help but feel like the fisherman who always had his bait stolen and went home with a sunburn and no dinner. In the summer months, we either moved or I explored the neighborhood alone, and I continued to look forward to dreams. By 7th grade, I started having favorite dreams, a recurring dream. I woke up on a hill, a fig tree leaning over a still lake, and an older woman with short hair cut just below her chin smiled. "Welcome home, Bren." In the dream, I ran to hug her waist. The dream started before I hit puberty, and the woman was tall and warm. It felt safe to press my face into her apron as my small frame was enveloped in her arms. She would stroke my hair and say beautiful things I wished my mother would say to me. My face would crinkle, and I'd hold back tears as she said she was proud of me. She had an older son, a few years older than me, and we played. He had a treehouse, and we'd eat lunch, bring card games, and decorate it with things we found at the lake. A built-in shelf held a squirrel skull we found in the mud at the base of the tree. A limestone rock with a million fossilized shells and pieces of blue glass, worn smooth by water and time. These two people in the dream would remember what I told them as seasons changed in their lives as well. In every way, it felt real, except for the minor detail that from the nose up, their faces were in shadow. In the dream, I didn't notice, but when I woke up, it felt like those two people could be anyone. The boy had a small, blunt chin, curly brown hair, and round cheeks. He was a little clumsy, but I didn't mind. Even in my dreams, I ran awkwardly with the gait of a grasshopper. I also didn't know his name or his mother's name. These were details that washed away upon waking. As my mother and I jumped from state to state, I stopped caring that she was rarely home when I was awake. I stopped caring that I had no friends, cared if I moved, or would save me a seat in the auditorium. I got to see my friends every night for 8 hours. At the time, I didn't think it was too unusual to have a recurring dream almost every night. My friendship with the boy, as he became a man, changed as I grew up. For a few years, we would hug in the treehouse, and I would bury my face in his chest, and he would rest his cheek on the top of my head. We became closer and different, and I found myself feeling different about him, more about him every time I woke up. His mother would look at me knowingly and smile when I woke up there, and I would blush and look for him. Friends don't hold hands the way we held hands as we looked out at the lake and listened to the waves of crickets and the reflections of 1,000 fireflies blinking like distant stars. It wasn't until I was in 12th grade that I found out my dreams were unusual. In creative writing class, we were asked to write about our most memorable dream. Easily, I filled pages about my sleeping life. I wrote about last night. We dipped our feet in the lake on the old pier. My rolled-up jeans touched the water, and we tried to stay still for the minnows to nibble our bare toes. In the water's reflection, I saw his face break into a wide, braces-filled smile as he lumbered over and tickled me. Even though I saw him coming, I couldn't help but curl up and squirm in a fit of giggles, rolling into his lap and clinging to him, eventually toppling us both into the laughing water. The dream ended with him kissing my forehead and temple, then tapping my cheek twice with 2 fingers. That was our ritual. I'd stand on my tiptoes and kiss him twice on the same cheek. One kiss for now, and another for when you need it later. I sat in class and listened to everyone read their dreams aloud. One girl blushed a little and read, "I usually don't remember my dreams. I mean, if I do, it's just fragments of something. Last night I dreamed someone broke in and I tried to call my dad. Suddenly the thief was right behind me and I felt him there, and no matter how fast I ran, he was faster, like my legs weren't working. I was so scared. I woke up right before I felt his hands around my neck. I couldn't go back to sleep. The nightmare was so bad. I dreamed I was playing football with the team. Everything was normal except the mascot was a real wolf, and we could jump like Master Chief in Halo. Wish that was real. Real wolves are cool, the boy exclaimed, pretending to throw a ball and smirking. A girl blushed and demurely tucked her hair behind her ear. I dreamed the doctor came to pick me up. 10, like David Tennant. I got to go into the TARDIS and see the swimming pool. Yeah, wish I had that dream every night. Then it was my turn. I briefly explained that I usually dreamed every night and often dreamed about the same thing. The same 2 people in the same place, and I remembered most of the details. Except their faces were shadowed, and I didn't remember their names. It was like a living memory. The TARDIS girl giggled. Maybe it's your soulmate. I never have the same dream twice. That's weird. The football boy chuckled. Yeah, it'd be nice to dream every night. Sounds beautiful, the girl with the nightmare said. She smiled at me. The class suggested all sorts of things to me. See a psychic, interpret dream meanings, place an ad for a soulmate, and keep a dream journal before the dismissal bell rang. It made me a little confused and curious for the first time if those dreams meant anything. I wanted them to mean something. I wanted not to be alone. My whole life, I had only felt an intense longing for connection with people. Dreams weren't enough to nourish a person, and I felt tired. Mother was working overseas now, and while she provided for me to ensure I had all I could want or need, loneliness was a void. My rational side decided I should talk to someone that it wasn't normal for a girl, almost 18 with no friends, an absent mother, a dead father, and a dream boyfriend. It couldn't be healthy. Surely many other teenagers had it worse. My family wasn't abusive, and my mother had ensured I felt well provided for. We didn't have to worry about money, and I was indulged in the sense that if I wanted something, I could buy it. By the time I was in high school, I had my own small library at home. However, there was no one to talk to. I started talking to the head counselor, Mr. Goldstein, as a last resort. He had seen my type before. Kids who struggled to fit in, kids who moved and were uprooted so many times that it stunted development. He tried his best to help. Every time I felt melancholy, he listened. When I told him about the trouble being a super magnet for friendships, he suggested after-school activity clubs, hobbies. I really poured everything out to him. And it had been a long time since anyone had truly listened to me. The nannies were the last people I had such a relationship with. And all I had of them were memories. I didn't dream of them anymore. Although the relationship was only counselor and student, it was something for me to hold onto in the waking world, and for a while I felt better. Then, like everyone else did, Mr. Goldstein left. The school said he had to take a leave of absence for personal reasons. That happens sometimes. Adults have tons of obligations, and I was assigned a replacement. Ms. Kwan. I liked her enough, but I felt she wasn't as invested. It felt almost more like going to a doctor than opening up to a potential friend. Even with Mr. Goldstein gone, he had given me the impetus to prepare for graduation and apply to college. Mother decided to stay overseas and sold our house. She bought me an apartment in the Northeast. Near the large university I was accepted into, driven to succeed, and provided for. Mother gave me a generous allowance each month. Although she couldn't be there for me physically, she ensured I had the means to survive as always. Once again, in a different part of the country and a new school, I started looking for a semblance of normalcy. Still dreaming of my boy and his lake, his mother making cold turkey sandwiches and packing us a liter of cold Coke. And we would devour them, feet splashing in the cold lake water. He'd take a bite of his sandwich and look at me, always a curly black lock of hair over his fingers. "Are you real?" I could feel his eyes on me, touching the sharp and soft lines of my face. I laughed. We avoided this conversation. We never had it. In all the years I'd visited him, I was happy to have a place where I was normal. I didn't want my difficulties to intrude on this comfort. "What kind of question is that? Of course I'm real. I think I'm more real here with you than when I wake up." He blinked. In this world, I could both see and not see his face. It was a jarring experience when I woke up. The memory of his face was there somewhere. But when I recalled the dream from the nose up, his face and his mother's were in shadow. You wake up, Brenna, and you dream all this too? He grew silent, and I felt disoriented with the realization that I had hoped this. I had hoped that I was special. I had hoped dreams could be real and connect with people not just through flesh and blood. Yes, I go to sleep, I dream of you and your mother, and I wake up in my bed. I remember most everything, and pretty much I have the same dream as you here. My heart was pounding like a rabbit trying to escape. The texture of my dream was almost hyperreal, and I could hear the trees and leaves kissing the wind, the lake water smelled of wet moss and silt, and I held my sandwich feebly. It was soggy. Are you crazy? We're dreaming. This isn't real. You're not real. You should probably start seeing someone. Clearly, you're some figment of my imagination I created to fill the loneliness. I feel it can't be healthy. I look forward to these dreams. I look forward to seeing you and your mom again. This damn cabin. Brenna, I think I even saw you. I think I saw you when I woke up, Bren. He buried his face in his hands and trembled. I put my hand on his back and tried to soothe him, and silently wondered if he could feel my heart beating out of my chest. You know, I think those things too. I haven't seen you in the real world, at least I don't think so. I don't remember what you look like, it's vague. I frowned and rested my cool forehead against his bare shoulder. You think you saw me? Yeah, where you work you come in and order an orange scone and iced coffee every day and read a book. That's your smile. I froze and stopped stroking his back, and we sat up straight and looked into each other's eyes. Brenna, what book are you reading? Jane Eyre. I just picked up a copy of Jane Eyre. The next day, I met Brand. He wasn't working. He had called in sick and was sitting at a table anxiously watching the door. I had my copy of Jane Eyre tucked under my arm and almost dropped it when I saw him. And that's when my life truly began. Brand told me about his life, and I told him about mine. His mother had died when he was in middle school. It was a strange accident. They were at their cabin in the UP, and he and his father were fishing when it happened. His mother was eating breakfast alone and choked and died. They found her on the floor at midday, and it was too late. For Brand, his childhood ended there. They buried his mother, sold the cabin, and Brand lost his father too. He was still there but never got over his wife's death. He started drinking, and they just barely got by. Brand worked as a manager at the local coffee shop to make ends meet. He started dreaming of his mother when he had bad days. And then one day, I appeared. He had a more normal life than me. He had a good group of friends and had even tried dating a girl in high school, although he said nothing ever felt right. They didn't click as easily as we did, and for a long time he thought he was being unfair, comparing her to a dream, a ghost. But between school and work, he found himself in a better position to be single. That's how it all started, and reader, it was beautiful. I started to feel better. Before bed, every night, we'd chat via webcam and share our day. At night, we'd still share dreams. Except now, the setting would change occasionally. Brand would sometimes appear in my childhood home or at a favorite tourist destination I had visited as a child. While we were still apart, we spent hours together. I graduated and got my degree and moved back to his hometown. We bought a small apartment and helped his father, putting him into some programs to try to deal with his demons. We felt lucky, and I felt normal. He proposed, and we started talking about having a family together. I bought a few baby outfits, one for a girl and one for a boy, and placed them side by side, imagining the tiny body that could fill it. Then he got sick. It started with him being tired all the time. He began to lose weight. His hands started to shake, and he grew weak, just like what had happened to my father. The doctors tried to find out what was wrong with him, and all the tests came back normal. He was normal, but he was wasting away. His body began to shut down, and he was placed in hospice care. My hospice care. He was no longer in my dreams, but I had his human, his body, this shell, and I could hold its hand. I had never felt so alone. They say it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Without him, I lived half a life. I knew what happiness was, and now I knew without him that happiness would be lost. Doctors couldn't help him, medicine did nothing. Love only gave him comfort. So I resorted to the last thing I could think of. I hired a psychic. Do you know you can find them in the yellow pages? She came to our apartment in a beat-up gremlin. She had no bags, no amulets, no show. Madame Celeste was a pleasant-looking woman with skin that looked like old lips and hair that aged at 50. She had seen sun and long freckles across her nose where brown-rimmed glasses rested. She fit the boho chic psychic style, and I fully believed I should have burned my money rather than calling her. Can I see the man? She stood in the hallway. At least she was direct. I nodded and led her into the bedroom where he was situated. She pulled a chair to his bed and touched the air around him. She gently touched his face, placed her hand lightly on his chest, then stopped, just held his hand, closing her eyes. He is dying. I blinked rapidly. I didn't need a psychic to tell me Brand was wasting away. He was almost a skeleton with skin. Physical evidence made that clear. Dying, yes, if he leaves, he'll die. His essence, his spirit, his soul, whatever, is almost gone. He's almost empty, very empty. This person. She looked confused. What does that mean? He's empty, his soul is missing. I had no words. This was crazy. This woman was crazy. There are many types of death. Naturally, our bodies contain the soul until it breaks down. Like any building, time takes its toll, then the soul moves on as a natural order. But the body needs the soul as much as the soul needs the body. This body's soul is very damaged, only fragments remain. I don't know what caused it, but he can recover if there's no further damage. You can have hope. She looked at me, looking right through me. Can I hold your hand? I nodded and offered my hand to the woman. Her hand was cool and smooth, while mine was sweaty and trembling. She held it for a moment and closed her eyes, a line forming between her eyebrows. Her eyes snapped open, and she released my hand. Leave here. Leave here now if you love him. Call your mother. She has what you need to know. I have to go. She stood up and shook herself, casting a bewildered glance between Brand and me. I blinked, confused, terrified. What does that mean? Leave? Why? Why should I leave? Why should I call my mother? She swallowed. She knows things you haven't seen, haven't accepted. It's not my place to say, but she knows why she has known everything all along. She knows what went wrong. Goodbye, Ms. Brenna, and she left. I tried to follow her, but she ignored me, silently getting into her beat-up old car and with a roar drove off. I tried to call her. I tried to find her business, but she gave me nothing else. I called my mother. She emailed me occasionally to make sure I was okay, to ask about Brand. We weren't close, we never had been. She always had work and was overseas. She found a life she couldn't have in this country. I had forgiven her long ago. The phone rang, and within seconds she picked up. Brenna, are you okay? Why are you calling so late? Ah, right. Time difference. I forgot. The abruptness of the call combined with the lateness must have startled her. I told her what had happened that day, clumsily. I felt silly. I never told her about my day or my life or the little things that bothered me. She was always too busy, time too precious for me to waste on my small problems. She was silent when I finished and took a breath. Brenna, my dear, I'm sorry. I'm so very sorry. She began to cry. I had never heard my mother cry. Your father and I loved each other very much, and we desperately wanted to have a child. We tried for years. We tried IVF. We tried infertility treatments. Something was wrong with me. I couldn't have children. My dear, I was desperate to be a mother. I wanted to have my own child. I wanted to have a child that was the product of our love, and I was so selfish and foolish. She trembled as she cried and said, I prayed every night for a miracle. One night I dreamed I was at a crossroads, just me and a man dressed impeccably. He said he had heard of my difficulties and wanted to help, that I could also help him, and there would be no price for me to pay. I agreed, Brenna. He was kind and comforting. It was a beautiful dream to freely receive the life I desperately wanted, so I accepted. And then you were born, my miracle child. You were perfect with a crown of curly black hair, and you couldn't stop smiling. Your father was even more infatuated with you than I was and begged me to stay home to raise you. So your father stayed home and cared for you for all your needs and wants, and we were so happy. Do you remember? I nodded, clutching the phone. Father was my whole world back then. He tried his best to be a good father. Yes, Mom. Then Dad got sick. At first he was just tired, then he started losing weight, his hands started to shake, and he grew weak. One day he collapsed and then couldn't get out of bed. Doctors couldn't find out what was wrong. They couldn't find out why he was so sick. Blood tests, MRIs, everything was normal. My heart stopped beating. I had never heard this before. Why didn't I think to ask? When Dad died, I was devastated and afraid that you might get sick too, that it was some kind of fungus, amoeba, or unknown genetic disease. But you were the picture of perfect health. I couldn't bear Dad's death, and I immersed myself in work instead of being there for you, with you. I hired nannies to raise you for me, and for a while I was recovering. I was healing. I was going to cut back my hours when your first nanny got sick. I noticed her hands shaking, and she was tired lately. I was shocked, terrified, so I gave her money to take time off and moved us across the country for work. I couldn't breathe. This can't be true. How could I not have realized? Then the next nanny got sick, and I did the same thing. Over and over, I gave them money and moved you until your last nanny. Mad's little girl got sick. She died, Brenna, just like your father, and I didn't want to see it. Then you went to school, and everything was normal for a few years. You were depressed and started seeing the head counselor. And I thought we had finally gotten past the bad luck. Then I received a letter from the school telling us Mr. Goldstein took a leave of absence for personal reasons. Again, I didn't think anything of it. Then the next letter came saying he had passed away. After that, I looked into your old nannies. All of them had passed away. Everyone you touched, truly touched in life, died, and I finally remembered the dream at the crossroads, the dream with the demon. I didn't have to pay a price, but there was a price. He visited me again. The rumpled suit, the nightmare dream. He smirked at me, sneered at me, and asked how my precious daughter was. He thanked me for bringing one of his creatures into the world. A creature not entirely whole, a creature not entirely human. He told me that the price for your existence depends on you, taking it from others. Everyone is wary of you, Brenna, because you are a predator. They know you are dangerous, so they put up walls. If people let you in even a little, you just suck the life out of them until they wither into empty shells. Your father, the nannies, your fiancé, those poor people let you into their lives, and you used them all up. I live in another country, so I don't have to be near you. My letters came from fake addresses. You are my demon, my curse, the burden I have to carry, and I am so sorry I brought you into this world. Please don't call me again. She hung up. I stared at the phone as my mind added her perspective to my limited one. All this time, I chose to view my story as the underdog, the fragile protagonist, struggling against misfortune. I didn't consider that I had control over my narrative, that all this time I had power. I was the monster. Putting the phone down, I undressed and showered. I let myself cry. I poured everything out and I prepared. Hair still dripping, I packed my laptop, a few clothes, made arrangements for Brand, and flew several states away to try and cut the distance between us. Distance wasn't the problem, it was my hunger and connection to him. Last night, I found the answers. Many answers, all from a man in a rumpled suit. I'm glad I packed my laptop. I'm quite pleased this hotel has free Wi-Fi. I've discovered my dreams touch everyone. I'm not a rich in water, a repulsive force. Instead, I knock people down like dominoes, one after another after another. I'm the architect, I can save Brand, I just need you. Words are a clever invention, truly. They are the voice in your head, a waking dream. Almost. My voice is in your head. My story is behind your eyes. I'm in you now. As we age, we think tiredness is a normal aging process. Sometimes we take on too much, and tiredness can be a sign we need rest. When you're tired, I highly recommend you take a vacation, enjoy the peace and those memories. You won't have much time. I won't save you. I need it. I need so many things. Reader, most of all, I need Brand, and you are just an unnamed creature on the other side of the screen.